Anyway, so the NGI at a glance, for those who don't know too much about it, it was launched in the autumn of 2016, and it's an initiative where the European Commission are aiming to shape the development of the Internet of Tomorrow into what they call the Internet of Humans. So, restoring trust in what's happening with your data, your privacy, security, combating disinformation online, guaranteeing access and freedom of choice, respecting fundamental rights, and enforcing ethics and sustainability by design. So it's, reflecting the European values and norms. Now, we were fortunate to be involved in it from the very start. Alan Davey put in a proposal, and which eventually became the Speak NGI.eu project, which myself and Paul Malone, mainly, and a couple other people as well, worked on from 2017 until, I guess, the end of 2019. So what that project did was it helped, it was one of the Pathfinder Coordination Support Action projects, which helped build the initiative, or helped the Commission build this initiative. And we were responsible for the consultation platform, so gathering feedback from the different stakeholders in NGI. And there were two other projects, one looking at the strategy of the program and one looking at the the research topics of the program. So anyway, NGI grew, leaps and bounds since then. So now, they are supporting research and innovation action projects, which then are used to support through open calls, grants that are directly supporting innovators, and in some cases actually individual researchers. So they don't even have to be an organization, developers, startups, and social innovators. So they're trying to attract what they call the non-usual suspects. So, Paul and I used to kind of joke that, more than likely we would be considered the usual suspects, whereas, the ones they're trying to attract were the non-usual suspects. So it was more the startups, SMEs, entrepreneurs, and as I said, even individuals. Okay, so these research and innovation actions are set up such that 80% of the budget is for the open calls, so to support the individual projects, and then 20% of the budget is for the actual partners themselves, who are in the RIA, who are coordinating the open calls, mentoring, training, etc. Is everyone still with me there?
Yep, everyone's on mute.
Okay, Deirdre. I may just ask you that from time to time in case, God forbid, the system did crash on me and I'll be talking to myself. Okay. But so there's also some coordination support action projects which have continued. Okay. So now in a bit more detail about the projects themselves and the topics themselves. So since the Speak NGI project finished and the other two coordination support action projects finished, we, as part of our project, we were able to help the Commission select the first three topics basically, and also kind of start on the next three topics. So the first three topics that were selected during the lifetime of Speak NGI.eu was privacy and trust enhancing technologies, decentralized and better data governance, so like ledger technologies, blockchain technologies, and then also better ways to do search and discovery and identification technologies. So those are the three original call topics for NGI, and they opened about 2 years ago now, I guess it would be. And so they're funding 4 RIAs in those topics. So the first topic is covered by a project called NGI Zero Pet and NGI Trust. And then the decentralized and better data governance is NGI Ledger, and discovery and identification technology, search and discovery is NGI Zero Discovery. Okay. Now, the way that they open or that they run the open calls is quite different, and each one has to be checked individually. For example, the two zero projects, NGI Zero Pet and Discovery, they have open calls every 2 months, and then it immediately starts again the next day. Okay, so if their open call is June to the end of July, their next open call opens the 1st of August, and it keeps going until they literally run out of money. That's the way they're running their open call. And they're one of the ones that allow individuals to participate. NGI Trust and NGI Ledger are more structured, where they have one call per annum. And they are also quite different in that the NGI Trust one requires, if organization wants to continue in the second phase or in the second year, they must actually bring in capital from either industry or venture capitalists, et cetera, et cetera. So again, the difference between the open calls are quite substantial. So you really have to read the fine print. Then the newer projects just started in January. One of them may have started in December, but they're more or less starting around the same time as NGIAtlantic.eu. So the other three, one is dealing with strengthening internet trustworthiness with electronic identities, that's SFLab, service and data portability, that's DAPC, and open internet architecture renovation, that's NGI Pointer. So I know that Stephen Davey is already checking into the open internet architecture renovation, because there's been quite a lot of work done by Miguel and Michal Kravi and different people in the TSSG on the RENA work, which might fit in well here. Okay, so just on the deadline dates, the NGI Zero Pet has a deadline the 1st of June. NGI Trust is the 4th of May, so there's really not too much time left. Ledger is closed already. Their second tranche closed on the 28th of February. NGI Zero Discovery, actually that's a mistake. It's not one of the new topics. That's an old one. That is closing on the 1st of June. And again, it's running sort of in parallel with their kind of sister projects, NGI Zero Discovery, NGI Zero Pet. And again, their next one, provided they have money left over, will start on the 2nd of June. SFLab, they have two deadlines coming up. One is on infrastructure projects, and the other one is on business-oriented projects. And DAPC, their deadline is today, actually. And NGI Pointer, the deadline is the 1st of June. And that one has, in terms of the budgets, they're all different as well. But I know the NGI Pointer one is about 200,000 euros for the open call, so it's quite substantial. And then our own project, NGIAtlantic.eu, our first call is opened, and it closes on the 29th of May. And then the next one will open again the 1st of August. So we're kind of doing it a little bit similar to the NGI Zero projects, in that the calls are running quite regular, although we do have a gap of either 2 or 3 months in between our calls, which will give us some breathing space to select the winners and get them up and running, and then we start a new open call again. There's quite a lot of what we call coaching going on even in this pre-proposal period, because it's quite a complex scheme trying to get the EU and the US participants to work together, because the funding is such that we only do the funding for the EU side, and then the US side has to be funded by someone in the US. So we're doing a lot of coaching the EU-based applicants who are interested, to try to help them to find partners in the US. And I'll continue on here. Just a quick slide here. I'll just focus in on one of the coordination support actions, NGI Explores, which has an open call as well, but it just closed yesterday. So this is for fellowship missions to the USA for top European research and innovators. Now, we have a few entries in this call that went in yesterday, which is good. And Mohit has already won one of these in their last call. But unfortunately, he's currently held up because of the COVID-19 situation. But eventually, he will be going, I think, for 3 months to the USA on that grant. Okay. So the NGIAtlantic.eu project, as I said, is bridging EU-US research on NGI. So it's running for a period of 30 months. Now, what the Commission have told us that they would, like our project to do is to take the results that are coming out of the other, well, on the one hand, I should say, we don't want to just be inclusive to those projects. We want to be inclusive to new entrants as well. But what the Commission have told us after we won the project was they would like to see some of the results that are coming out of the other RIAs that I just presented coming together with some teams in the US. Now, by team, I mean either one or possibly two maximum, entities. Okay, they cannot be individuals; they have to be entities, but they cannot be consortia. Like you're used to in H2020. So what they would like to see happening is that, if, let's say, for example, some good result comes out of the Ledger open call, they would like to see that result being experimented with a U.S. partner, okay, whether they would be part of one of the National Science Foundation big platforms that they have. They have both wired and wireless platforms. Or it could also be an industry, or it could be both. It could be perhaps one of the platforms plus one industry member as the U.S. team. So that's what they would like to see happening here, that some of these NGI success stories will then connect up with with some ongoing activities in the U.S. Okay, and then it will then sort of create better collaboration between EU and US research teams. And again, as I said, it also is obviously open to new new entrants as well. And it's also open to having the experimental part of it done in the EU side. So, the likes of Fed for Fire could be involved in carrying out some tests. But you have to have an EU and a U.S. team member as to be eligible for our funding. Okay, so just in a nutshell, there's going to be 5 open calls between now and the end of the project. There's 2.8 million euros funding, so it's approximately 600K per call. The NGI experiments will be called. We are in the process, or nearly have set up, an external advisor group from members from both EU and US. The members from the EU are mainly the coordinators from all of those projects that I've just presented previously, because we want to make sure that they're disseminating all of our materials to within their open call participants, which are probably in the hundreds at this point. And then on the U.S. side, we're trying to get both research-oriented people, quite high-level people, and also industry people, from the West Coast to the East Coast. Okay. Then we've recruited an external pool of evaluators in a very similar way to the European Commission, how they do that. And we've set up what we call a twinning lab, where applicants can enter their information on the web platform in both US and EU, and they can use that to do some potential matchmaking. And then continuous coaching and mentoring. So as I mentioned, there's both a coaching element and a mentoring element. The coaching is more short-term, so it's like one-to-one calls. So I spend almost every single day having 2 to 3 calls with potential applicants, explaining what they need to do, how they need to do it, and then we have a very large frequently asked questions list, which we are continuously updating, whenever we get questions in from people. And it's very, very interesting because, the questions are, quite complex sometimes because, it's something that we haven't done before and it's quite new, and, and the people are really finding sort of what I would call the gray areas that we need to, be quite careful about answering in these sessions. But I find that the coaching sessions are quite useful in that usually at the end of them, they go away as an applicant, really. I find if we just answer on email or just point them to the website, I think they just tend to go away and say, well, it's probably easier to get funding somewhere else. So those are quite important. Now, the mentoring will kick in more when the projects are selected and started, and we have a mentoring schedule with the projects that we'll be conducting. Can you still hear me, Deirdre?
Yeah, we can, yep.
Great, okay. I'm probably getting a bit short on time, am I? What is it? It's nearly 20 minutes now, I guess. So anyway, just the Twinning Lab, as I mentioned, it's a place where researchers and innovators can put up their information and do a bit of matchmaking. So it's a little bit like what the Commission do during the big ICT events, where they have kind of a matchmaking facility on the website. We have to be, I suppose, a little bit careful that we can't really be seen to be non-neutral in helping too much, I guess. So that's one of the things that we're continuously evaluating. Whether what information we're giving them, whether it's neutral. It has to remain somewhat neutral. And without giving some impression that they might have some leg up on other applicants. We have 2 different types of projects that we're going to fund. A longer term, which is a 6-month duration, although we will be allowing a 3-month no-cost extension if requested, and a short-term contribution project, so it's 3 months. So like a good example of a short-term contribution project, it could be a project that it might be 2 like an industry member, let's say in the EU, wants to partner with another industry type company to explore some potential collaborations and run maybe some experiments on their software. So that could be a 3-month project, whereas a longer one could be in like an academic partner with a startup participating with an academic partner in the US, or an academic partner with another industry partner in the US. So that would be, typically a longer term. Now, the funding will also enable traveling as well. And what we're suggesting to them is that for a 6-month project, they should try to include at least 3 travels. So 1 for an initial meeting, 1 for a kind of a midterm, maybe installation of the experiments, and then 1 towards the end, and where we can perhaps even have a workshop, because the project is also organizing different workshops as well. So, as I said, the first open call, the indicative budget is $600,000, and the expected start date of the first set of projects will be around the 1st of July 2020. and they will run for the rest of the year into the new year. Okay, this is just a bit more detail about the open call topics, which I won't really go into. In terms of the experimental platforms, this could be interesting. So on the EU side, what we're talking about here is the NGI EXP, which is another name for what used to be known as FIRE. So the FIRE program sort of morphed into this NGI-EXP. Now, currently, it's really only a Twitter and a LinkedIn group, Twitter feed and LinkedIn group, and it's it's just a place where they disseminate information. The Twitter feed is quite active. The LinkedIn feed is not active at the moment. Fed for Fire Plus is still an ongoing project, so they would definitely be considered to be an interested party in this in these open calls, and we've been in close contact with them, and we actually have them on the external advisory group. And then also the 5G PPP, where there's quite a number of projects, especially in the third phase, which are looking specifically at experimentation. So we're hoping to somehow bridge some of them with US entities as well as part of this. On the US side, there's quite a large number of involved platforms or projects, if you will. There's both the wired and wireless funded programs. So Genie, which then morphed into what's called Enter, and now there's a new larger Fabric platform, which will eventually incorporate Enter/Genie as well. Then there's another one called Future Cloud Platform, which we've been in touch with. And then on the wireless side, you have the Platforms for Advanced Wireless Research, PAWR, programs. So there's Cosmos, which is based in the New York City area, and that's coordinated by Rutgers, who's a partner in our project, and also Columbia University. And there's another one called Powder, which is coordinated by University of Utah, who's another one of our partners. And then there's 15 or so US EU Internet Core and Edge program projects, or ICE-T as it's known, which were funded about a year before our project came into being, which was a little bit unfortunate because originally in the NGI EU-US plan, they were supposed to be funded at the same time, but for some reason or glitch, it didn't happen. So the US NSF ICE-T program started a year before it started at the same time as the two coordination action projects, and not the research and innovation action project. But the good news is that some of them are still running for the next 2 years. And the way the funding for the EU side of those was through existing H2020 projects and even some FP7 projects, which are all finishing. So some of those ICE-T US partners want to be involved in our program now to either fund their current EU partners or even new EU partners. So even though somehow the NSF and the Commission weren't able to sort of couple these two programs at the right time, it still seems as if we're going to be able to capitalize on the fact that there is such a program. And the NSF are also looking at doing an ICE-T2 program, but we're still not sure whether that will be possible, but we're hoping that it will be. Okay. So I guess, Deirdre, it's probably going a little bit over time now, so maybe one thing I do want to just talk about is the open call, the funding challenges, and then maybe just leave it at that. Would that be?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, if everyone else is happy with that.
Okay. All right. So just on sort of, I don't want to call it the bad news part of it, but one thing that has cropped up in this what actually in the beginning, while we were still in the negotiation stage, we realized that because there's such a large percentage of the budget going towards the open call, the European Commission withhold 15% from the full budget, from the coordinator, for the entire 15% of the entire budget, including the 2.8 million for the open calls. So 15% of the 2.8 million is actually 420,000, which is quite a large, substantial amount of money. And so after we started the project, we learned that the Commission even though that money is being withheld from the coordinator, the Commission is still expecting, the coordinator to fund the open calls, even though this money hasn't hit our bank account yet and won't hit it until the very end of the project when you do the final cost claim. So of course this caused, us to, try to look at, different ways of, minimizing risk and, things like that. So what we have proposed to do is that we will withhold 15%, and the Commission has said point blank, you cannot withhold 15% until after the project gets paid the last 15%. They've just ruled that out as an option completely. So what we have countered back to them is, okay, we won't do that, but in order to minimize the risks to us, what we request to do is to withhold the 15% until the interim review is held in month 16 and the final review is held in month 31. So if you have open call projects funded in the period before the interim review and they're paid, they will be paid 85% of the funds. Then when we have a successful review in month 16, we will release the 15% to those projects. And then similarly, any open call projects that are funded in the second part, when we have our successful review in month 30 or 31, as soon as the review is deemed to be successful, we will release the funds, the remaining 15%, to the open call projects. Then we will put in our cost claims, and then we will eventually get back that remaining 15%. So it does two things. It minimizes the risk that in case at the project review that one of the reviewers says, hey, those two projects there were no good, we don't want them funded, and then you have to try to claw back the money from the open call projects. That's risk number one. And then the second risk would be to be in this sort of a cash flow negative situation for a very long period of time. If we were paying out the 100%. So if we pay it out in month 30 and we do the cost claim straight away in month 32, then hopefully we'll get paid in month 33. So basically we're in a negative situation for a short period of 1 to 2 months, which is manageable by the finance department. So anyway, that's the current situation with the funding of the project. Okay. Does anyone have any questions? As I said here, although we cannot participate ourselves to our own project's open calls, if you yourselves, or if you know of anyone, or if you yourselves want to participate to the other ones, please do so, because it's a 10-page application versus 50 to 70-page application. And then in terms of our open calls, if you know of any other organization or even some of the startups, perhaps in in ARC Labs or anywhere else, please let us know so that we can send them an information pack